Welcome to Negotiation Made Simple, where we help you master the art of negotiation and win the next deal. In this episode, I am really excited about my conversation with Richard Schell, the Thomas Garrity Professor of Legal Studies and Business Ethics and Management at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. For the last few decades, Professor Schell has been researching and writing and speaking on negotiation and other topics that are critical for negotiators, things such as influence and psychology and ethics. And today we're going to jump into a conversation about those topics. We're going to talk about the important people elements around negotiation and how relational capital plays into negotiation. So let's jump into this conversation with Richard Schell of the Wharton School. To jump right into it, let's start with, tell people, how is it that you became interested in the negotiation and the kind of the dispute resolution, psychology influence space? What attracted you to that?
Yeah, no, I think oddly enough, I think it goes all the way back to who raised me.
Okay.
My dad was a general in the Marine Corps. My mom was, they were sweethearts from early on. But personality-wise, they were both very conflict avoidant.
Okay.
And so I grew up in a house where people, they argued, but they argued in their own special way. It was like a code, I didn't really pick up on it until I was late, in my 20s, that, oh, that's how they argued. They would sort of look at each other a funny way. So the whole area of conflict for me was a big mystery. And So I got through life. I got to my professional career. I was a lawyer, and as soon as you get into law, you realize it's really just negotiation in a 100 different guises. There's settling lawsuits, there's arbitration, there's mediation, there's negotiating deals, and I was singularly unprepared for it myself. Mm-hmm. Because I'd grown up in this really harmony type household. So I made it my purpose to really go to school on it and to kind of learn it from the ground up. So everything I've done, and then when I went to Wharton, as magic would have it, there was no negotiation course. And so I got to be the guy who started the negotiation course, both for our undergrads and our MBAs, but also, and even more interestingly, for our executives. So for me, it was study, learn, practice, and then, you're a teacher too. There's no better way to learn and lock in learning than to teach it.
Sure. And
so I was responsible at Wharton for starting up the negotiation classes in these three important venues, and of course, the more I taught it, especially to executives, the more I learned from them about the practical problems that they faced, about the application of these principles. And a typical example of the way this worked for me, I was teaching an executive group, and we got to should you open or not. Okay. And so, my rule of thumb from the work I'd done was, no, never open. Let the other guy go first, figure it out from there. And there was an executive in the room who was a very experienced person who acquired businesses. That was what he did. And he raised his hand and said, Richard, I couldn't disagree more. In my business, I'm buying entrepreneurs, startups and other kinds of family businesses and things like that. And if I let them open, I'm in big trouble because this is their baby, this is their child, and they'll triple the value because that's what they think it's worth. And if I don't open and sober them up in the first round, then I'm going to have a heck of a time bringing them down to reality, and they'll be insulted. So I always open. So I went, so there's a context in which this rule of thumb never applies. It's not just that it sometimes doesn't apply, because you've got a very informed buyer and you've got people who've only got to sell one big thing in their whole life.
Sure.
And so opening is really an advantage there to make sure you get to a realistic outcome. So executives were my teachers in a very fundamental way. So, you do it long enough. I've taught Navy SEALs, SEAL Team 6, actually.
Wow.
I've taught UN diplomats. I've taught hostage negotiators at the FBI. I've taught heads of business development for big companies and a lot of entrepreneurs who are working on the small side. And when you get that range of inputs, which is what we're privileged to do here, because the Wharton School brings in a lot of, it's not, they don't come to,
Impressive people. Yeah.
they may come to hear me, but mainly they come because I'm working at the Wharton School. Then you really learn a lot of practical tools.
Yeah. I love that idea in terms of, the idea of you being the teacher, you being the expert, but seeing one of your roles as constantly learning. There's a good lesson in there for all negotiators because this process is not something that's static. It is constantly changing as people change and their decision-making changes. Talk to us a little about what you're seeing as far as people and how people negotiate. How is it changing today? What's your observations?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, in a fundamental sense, I think negotiation is always negotiation.
Sure.
And I think no matter how sophisticated we get with AI and with technology, and you don't have to look very far to see that the real action is when people sit down together and they look each other in the eye and they figure out what it is that the problems are and how they can try to solve them and come to an agreement. So in that sense, I think it's still basically a fundamental human activity. And the Romans were doing it, and now we're doing it, and not a great deal has changed in that era, in that 2,000 years. I think at the same time, I think we have people's attention span is much shorter. They're going in a much more at light speed from task to task to task to task, and so I think the mistakes they're making are different. They're more impatient. They focus more on getting it done and less on investigation of what it is that is worth doing. And I think there's I think a good part of what's happened in the last 20, 30 years is the global economy has homogenized into what I call the global business civilization.
Okay.
And we have, there's all geopolitical tracks, there's China, there's America, there's, different regions, but within the sort of level of people that do international business, and that's a lot of what we handle at Wharton. Everybody speaks English. Everybody has a sort of a capitalist set of assumptions, and everybody has a common set of dispute resolution tools. I mean, it could be international arbitration in the background, or it could just be the relationships that they're forming that are multi-dimensional. And so there's a fair amount of common experience that they're bringing to the process that probably, a generation or two ago, culture would have loomed much larger as a problem or as a barrier. It's still a factor in negotiation, and we need to be, very respectful and civil and mindful of different cultures and how they consider how to show respect, how to handle the formalities. But I think that the good news is, good example. In the situation in Gaza right now, who was actually behind the scenes, putting it together? Jared Kushner.
Yeah.
He's not a diplomat. He's a deal maker. And so the skills that he uses to start a hotel in Albania turn out to be pretty relevant to trying to figure out how to get these warring parties to sort of figure out how to make a future. So those are some of the trends I see.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, at the end of the day, I always tell people, you know, even though people might be representing organizations or businesses or clients or whatever the case might be, negotiation is always still people to people. And you can't remove the people dynamics of it. I do a lot of work in the insurance industry. They tried that in terms of
Oh
removing the
yeah, no,
people
I know they.
dynamics,
Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah. That
terms of
online
saying,
dispute resolution.
yeah,
Yeah,
well, that and saying like, we have an algorithm that tells us the value of the claim,
right.
but the reality is that's not satisfactory to the insured that says, yeah, but I need this too, and that didn't get factored into the algorithm, and so there is that element. I want to jump into that, but as we kind of get started with this. You've broken down negotiation in a couple of different ways, and I want to give you an opportunity to kind of share that with people, and then we can jump into some of these issues.
Sure. In the context of, the book I've written in the space is Bargaining for Advantage.
Yep.
It's now in 17 languages, and it's been on sale since 1999. It's still in
Wow.
print in its third edition.
That's great.
And so as I was developing the models for that book, I kind of just ended up with 4 stages. So there's a lot of anthropological research, but it kind of boils down to preparation, exchanging information, the bargaining and the exchange of proposal process, the bargaining process, and then closing and commitment. So you get ready, you find out what's going on, you put your proposals on the table and mix and match. And then at the end, you have to come to some kind of a commitment. Now, one of the big things in one of the big insights I had was negotiations are not about getting agreements. Negotiations are about getting commitments. And sometimes an agreement is a commitment and sometimes it's not. And so the more you are the negotiator in the room and not just someone who negotiates, the more you take the agreement as at the end as the starting place and say, okay, how can we add some bite to this agreement to make sure we keep our promises to each other and that we don't end up having to do this again 3 months from now. The difference, what I learned was this: the FBI taught me this. The difference between an agreement and a commitment is a commitment is something that someone will lose if they back out of it. How much they have to lose by backing out measures the strength of the commitment.
Yeah,
you have a lot to lose, strong commitment. A little to lose, a weak commitment. Now, the have to lose could be money, but it could also be trust. It could be reputation. It could be relationships and future opportunities. It could be all kinds of things that the person is processing when they get later on and go, should I back out of this deal or that deal? Well, I have a stronger commitment on this deal. I better keep that one. So 4 stages, and the commitment part is the last one. And it's a really crucial one, so you don't have to do it over. And then 6 foundations. So number 1, personality. As you say, people negotiate and people have personalities. So the place to start is, what's my personality and how am I viewing the world? Am I agreeable? Am I competitive? Am I someone who is quick to compromise? In the book, I've got an assessment for that to help people get a photocopy of themselves. Secondly, setting goals. And the most important part of goal setting is how much you believe in your goals. That's the conviction you bring. So second piece is goal setting. Third piece, fair standards. So what are the fairness criteria? If you're in insurance, how do you value a claim? Well, you have comparable claims, you have medical expenses, you have a set of criteria that are normally used to help people decide what the range of outcomes might be that are fair. So that's the third. Fourth foundation, relationships. The whole process, as you know, is fundamentally premised on reciprocity, the give and take. We do things for people who do things for us. We make concessions when people give concessions to us. We give information to people who give information to us. So reciprocity and relationships is the fourth. And then the fifth is interest. What are our motivations? What are the hopes, the fears, the needs, the dreams that bring people to the table, and how can we address them? And finally, the sixth one is leverage. And leverage goes back to commitment. Leverage is measured relatively speaking, who has the most to lose from walking away. So commitment is who has the most to lose from breaking their commitment, their agreement, and leverage is who has the most to lose at the beginning if they don't do the deal.
Yeah.
So the fear of loss is like the baseline. If you got a band, the fear of loss is the bass player.
Okay, got it. So I got a ton of questions, but it might be helpful for our listeners. Do you have like a story or an illustration that kind of shows this framework at work? Do you have a way in which you can articulate it in terms of walking people through a particular negotiation or particular story that might help them see this better?
Well, I mean, every negotiation has the whole subject in it. So you can go from the very simple to the very complex. But I think one of the most important things is leverage.
Okay.
And so I'll give you a leverage story that is about Donald Trump.
Okay.
Trump went to Wharton, and so he was a real estate and a celebrity before he became the president. And at the time I wrote the book, 1999, the first edition, I wrote about him. I actually taught his daughter in my class. She took my negotiation class. So here's a good example of his negotiating style, which is relevant given that he's president. Mar-a-Lago. He wanted to have this Mar-a-Lago property. His people had said there's this estate for sale down in Florida, and so he went down there. It was owned by a foundation. It was a former estate of a very wealthy family, but they'd sort of put it in receivership. So it was in a trust. He went down and he started negotiating with them, and he offered. I don't know. I'll make up some numbers. I don't remember the details, but he offered $1 million, and they said they wanted $5 million. He said, "There's no way." Now this is standards. There was no valuation criteria that you could come up with in his mind that got him to $5 million, and so he said, "No, it's a non-starter. Not going to work." And so I'm going to give you a second offer. How about $900,000? Now. You can see what he was doing was saying the $5 million is so high that I know you're trying to anchor me, and so and that's going to change my goals. That's the second foundation, and so I'm going to re-anchor the whole negotiation by actually moving my number down. Well, the problem when you do that is the other side can get angry, and now we have a relationship problem.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. The trust said, "Well, we don't want to deal with you. Go away. We're going to be happy negotiating with somebody else." So nobody else actually showed up to buy it, but Trump's people came up with an idea. There was a strip of land between Mar-a-Lago and the ocean that was too small to build on, but it was for sale. And so he had some people secretly buy that strip of land. And then he went back to the trust and said, "I'm interested in reopening negotiations with you. I wonder if you're willing to talk to me." And they said, "Sure." And he said, "Well, there is a change. I now own the land between Mar-a-Lago and the ocean, and I plan to acquire a few more items here and build some very high condominiums that's going to completely block Mar-a-Lago's view of the sea and isolate it as a property. And I don't have to do that, but I'd be willing to do that now that I have this option. So my offer now is $800,000. So they now what had happened. What had happened was that by virtue of his acquisition of that property, he had the power to make Mar-a-Lago worth much less. And so now the trust was looking at a pretty grim situation. Nobody would want to buy it, or they'd buy it for the house, the price of a nice house, or they could sell it to Trump. And so they came back with $1.2 million, and they settled at $1 million, and he didn't build the condominiums, and he acquired Mar-a-Lago. So in the context of that, you see Trump's personality, very aggressive, very not especially relationship sensitive in the sense of like, do we like each other? Very high goals, very persistent, mindful of standards, and not going to come off standards that he thinks are unfair. Reciprocity in the relationship, there wasn't much of a relationship, but there was a give and take. Interest, he knew that he was going to change the leverage situation by by making their interests change. Now they had an interest in selling to him and soon, and then he managed it by altering the leverage that he had when we started to what he had when he ended. So there you go. There's a simple story that has all 6 foundations, and it's a story about a guy who negotiates a lot.
There you go. Yeah. So if you've got someone out there that may care about the relationship more, may not be as inclined to be as shrewd as a Donald Trump, what advice do you have for that person in terms of how to increase leverage without having to resort to some of those, very strong tactics?
Yeah. I think, first of all, most people don't operate like Trump. So, we're the world of business is fundamentally a relational enterprise. And I've never met a good negotiation that couldn't be ruined by a bad relationship, or a bad negotiation that couldn't be helped by a good relationship. So I think your normal case comes from a magic word: trust. And a good relationship in a negotiation context means people are actually looking out to help the other party in some way, not necessarily to help them by giving them, everything that they want, or giving them expensive things, but showing that they care enough about the other party's interest to be helpful. So then, as soon as you create a relationship that has that mutual benefit in it, then implicit in that is what might happen if the relationship stops. And now that's leverage, because now that's something the other party would lose the benefit of if you have to withdraw, not because you don't like the person or you're playing hardball, but because you simply are insisting on fair terms and conditions and the options you have in the world. Normally, people don't negotiate entirely for themselves. They're negotiating on behalf of their company or their shareholders or their families or something. Sure. And a responsible negotiator will always go to a better deal if it's available without being insulting about it. And so I think the more you're able to create a relationship of mutual benefit, that gives you leverage, in the sense that if you are forced to withdraw from it or modify it, that motivates the other party to want to come to you a little more. So it's in the same lessons go for people inside organizations. The more essential you become to your working unit or to your company because you have bright ideas or because you help people work well together or whatever it is that you do, the more integrated and essential you become, the more your disappearance is going to be costly.
Yeah.
And that becomes the foundation for asking for a fair compensation and for promotions and things. And in a sense, you're not going to walk away from the company, but the fact that you're motivated and you're enthusiastic is a benefit that they would miss, and that's what leverage is.
Yeah, and there's that juxtaposition between kind of the issue or the goals and the relationships, and that's something that negotiators have to balance.
It's the paradox of negotiation. Absolutely,
it is, and what's interesting about that is that there isn't a rule that applies, because negotiation, the relationship is different or the goals are different. And so that's kind of what makes this process fun and dynamic, is you might find yourself on different places in that juxtaposition in every single negotiation, which means you got to be dynamic in how you handle it.
Yeah. And I like to say no negotiation's ever over. Because most people think, there's a beginning, a middle, and end.
Yeah.
But actually, there isn't an end, because unless you die, there is an end in that way. But there's always an unknown sort of possibility of things transforming themselves into the future, where you reacquaint with this person, or this person's got control of your reputation and they can affect it with other people they speak with. But so I like to think that relationship building is just a habit. You never stop it. It's something that just creates value all the time, and then you do that's just who you are, and then you reap the benefits of that when the opportunity arises. Can I give you a story?
Please, fire away.
So I do a program for Enterprise Rent-A-Car every year, and Andy Taylor, who's the now executive chair of Enterprise, they're based in St. Louis, sits through my negotiation day. It's part of a leadership program. They have their fast trackers in for a whole week. But he's really, it's a family business. Most people don't know that. Enterprise is a family business. It's got 90,000 employees. The Taylor family owns it. The first time I taught this program, Andy was the CEO. The last time I taught it, his daughter is the CEO. And she took my negotiation class early, and now she's running the company. So one of the reasons that Andy sits through that program is he likes to share stories of how important negotiation is, and what kind of culture Enterprise is striving for. So I was, talking about trust, and he interrupted me and, said, "Richard, I got an example I might want to share." And whenever Andy Taylor interrupts, I get out of the way. So he said that Warren Buffett had tried to buy Enterprise Rent-A-Car a few years before this seminar was going. And they had actually a serious negotiation, because Warren Buffett's a pretty good buyer for your company. Yeah. But the family decided they didn't want to sell. So the deal ended with no deal. But it ended on good terms. Warren Buffett and Andy got, left the table in good order. So a couple of years later, Andy's sitting in his office and the phone rings, and it's Warren Buffett. And, little chit chat. And finally, Andy gets around to saying, "Well, Warren, what can I do for you?" And Warren said, "Well, Andy, thanks for asking. Our annual meeting of the Berkshire Hathaway shareholders is coming up in a month or so. And we just discovered there won't be enough rental cars in Omaha, Nebraska, where we have the meeting, because of some other events that are happening. And I wondered if you might be able to help us out by just getting some extra cars into Omaha for that weekend." And Andy said, "I think I can work with you on that. So let me work on it. I'll send you a note how it worked out." So he hung up. He called a bunch of Enterprise locations, shipped cars to the airport in Omaha, and get things going. But he also told everybody in Omaha, whenever that weekend, when people come to rent a car, ask them if they're a Berkshire Hathaway shareholder. And if they show, they show their credential, they get the best price Enterprise gives anybody. So we're going to offer them the Enterprise Plus discount. So he sent a note to Buffett saying that cars are available, you'll be good. And then he gets a thank you note the following week that, appreciate it. And Buffett adds to his note, "And by the way, thank you. I really appreciated I heard about that discount you gave our people, and we really appreciate it." Okay, tick-tock, tick-tock. 6 months pass, and the phone rings again in Andy Taylor's office, and it's Warren Buffett again. And more chit-chat, and Andy gets around to saying, "Well, Warren, happy to help you with your cars earlier. What can I do for you today?" And Warren Buffett said, "Well, Andy, I'm hoping today is something I can do for you. I've just been invited to come on CNBC, which is a business cable channel television, all business all the time, to do an hour-long special on American family-owned businesses. And I told him I'd do it, but only if you'll come with me and we spend the full hour talking about what a great company Enterprise is. And I wonder if you could make that possible, if you could clear your schedule for us."
Wow.
And he said, "I guess I can work that out." So that's what a relationship is. They ended with no deal, and many times that's a pretty sourpuss moment. But not these two guys. They're working on relationships 24/7. So a first opportunity that Andy has to give a little favor to Buffett, he gives it to him. Doesn't ask for anything. It's unexpected. It's delightful. It makes Warren Buffett look good. And then when Buffett has to reciprocate, that's that relationship thought, he's got a problem, what's he going to do for Andy Taylor? You can't send him a check. What's he going to do for him that is equally delightful, equally inexpensive, and also really valuable? And so you can just hear his little subroutine running. What about Andy? What about Andy? And then here comes this invitation, and he codes it right in and goes, that's what it'll do.
There it is.
And what does Andy Taylor get? He gets an hour-long infomercial hosted by Warren Buffett. How much is that worth?
That's the priceless.
Isn't that an amazing example of how this works?
Category. Yeah. Well, there is a lot of relational capital that can be built out there. And one of the challenges I think we're seeing is as we move farther into this digital AI world, it is limiting the opportunities that people have naturally to kind of build those kind of relationships like you just described. So what do you recommend to people? It seems like we've got to be much more intentional about investing in the relational side in order to be able to create not only just that kind of leverage at the table, but to create those kind of relationships that open the doors of opportunity for us.
Yeah, human capital. The rarer something gets, the more valuable it becomes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think in a world in which everybody is beginning to drift away from interpersonal connections, those people who are willing to invest in them are going to find that they're worth more.
Yeah, interesting.
And so a couple of examples. So Google. If ever there was a tech company, it's Google, right?
Sure.
Well, Google hires a lot of people from Wharton.
Okay.
And one of the things I learned from one of my former students is one of the things they teach them when they get into the different offices is not to use text or email to connect with other people on important topics. Now, think about it.
Yeah.
How many texts and emails do you think an average Google employee gets in an hour?
Yeah, hundreds.
Exactly. And how much attention do you think they get for that reason?
Yeah, very little.
Yeah, what they have to do is they teach these, Gen Y, Gen Zers, get up out of your chair, walk to the next building, and go talk to somebody that you want to actually influence. And that's actually how they get the important things done. So, it's a habit. I like to say all communication modalities and negotiation involves a trade-off between bandwidth, how much information can we convey to each other in a minute,
sure,
and convenience. Mm-hmm. So to the extent that you favor convenience over bandwidth, what are you creating? You're creating conditions for misunderstanding. You're creating conditions for incomplete information. Mm-hmm. You're creating conditions for no kind of subliminal affect, emotional intelligence, a way of interpreting what's being said. But sometimes convenience is more important. And, just a judgment. But to the extent that you can favor bandwidth over convenience and not just be tempted to by the devil of convenience all the time, then you're going to establish better communication, more dimensions of what's going on, better relationships so people trust one another. And that means the next time there's something going on between these people, they're going to return that phone call.
Sure. Yeah, that's really powerful stuff. A couple more things I want to touch on before we wrap this thing up. You've done a lot of work in the ethics space, and ethics is something that all of us are going to run into at some point where we find ourselves in a challenging ethical situation. That's very true in the context of negotiation.
Totally.
As a professional negotiator, I find myself in different ethical challenges all the time, trying to carefully think through how to maintain integrity, do the right thing, but also, pursue the deal in an appropriate way. And so what is the one piece of advice you would have for people that are out there doing business, making deals happen? What would you say to them as they run into some of these ethical challenges where maybe their red flags go up and they realize they got to pay attention?
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's a very rich subject. Your challenge is, what's the one thing?
Yeah.
I think I teach a course called Responsibility at Wharton, and I just finished it last week, and I got final papers I'm reading right now, and it's called Responsibility in Business. And a handful of the papers that I just finished reading started the paper by saying, well, the course is called Responsibility in Business, but I believe that to be responsible in business, you have to be a responsible person. And that's the habit you work on. And then responsibility in business just comes from who you are.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a pretty valid insight on the part of my 28-year-olds. And so I think ethics in negotiation, sort of the same way. We all do different things in different parts of our lives, and we play different roles. And being a negotiator is a role that we play, just like being a parent is a role that we play.
Sure.
But underneath the roles we play are the people we are, the character that we consider the non-negotiable part of who we are. And I think it's important for people who negotiate to realize that more important than the situations that you face is the authenticity of the character you bring. And so I think it behooves a negotiator to think hard about what their character is and what's non-negotiable, and then to bring that to the process. Now, it's tough because a lot of pretty highly conflicting things. You may be getting treated in a way that you consider to be unfair or even brutal, and your character is sitting there as another value. But my approach is to take what are the things that tempt you to behave badly. That is, to lie, to deceive, to betray agreements, to all the things that business incentives often are there for people. And ask yourself, okay, what are my alternatives when I'm tempted to do X that will keep my character? So I'll give you a quick example. Instead, my belief is, my personal belief is, never lie in a negotiation. Never lie in a negotiation. Instead, tell the truth slowly.
Interesting. Yeah.
So that puts prudence in place of deception and a kind of transparency. I really can't tell you the truth about what my reservation is. My reservation is right now. I don't think we've really developed a relationship of trust that would allow us to share that information, but I'm interested in building that relationship with you. So perhaps if we talk a little bit more and we share some ideas about what we could do for each other, we may get to that place, and then I'd be happy to share that with you. So that's transparent, it's prudent, and it's not deception. But it doesn't give away anything. So
one of the things I heard that has been very useful to me is this came from a CEO of a Fortune 500 company here in Nashville. And one of the things he said is, all your financial advisors will impress upon you the importance of having a good kind of safety net, rainy day fund. He says, I think that's important too, but for a totally different reason. He goes, it's to take away the feeling that you might need to do something that risks your integrity or challenges your character for a financial reason.
Wow.
And he says, if you get to a place to where you can build a strong safety net, then if you get asked to do something that you're not comfortable with, you have the ability to walk away.
Yep.
Or you have the ability to pursue, another path, or you can extract yourself out of that situation. And he says, I find so many people that have made a poor ethical decision. They felt like they had to because of some financial pressures. And he says, the more you can take those financial pressures away, the more free you are to protect yourself from an ethical standpoint. And I thought it was fantastic advice.
Yeah, that's great advice. John Huntsman, who built Huntsman Hall, and who his dad did. I'm talking about the dad. The son is a very important Republican and was ambassador to China and so on. But he's Wharton alum too.
Yeah.
And he's a Mormon, a member of the Church of the Latter-day Saints, and they take their ethics very seriously.
You bet.
And he tells a story in his book. He wrote a book that's sort of about business integrity, and he said he was in a negotiation to buy a guy's company. John Huntsman did plastic. He had the styrofoam cups that we used to have in McDonald's.
Yep.
He was a chemical company. So he was buying this guy's company, and they were in a very intense negotiation. And and then right near the end, maybe they had only 20% more to do. He learned that the other guy's wife had been diagnosed with cancer, and he had a choice. He could have continued to negotiate and probably gotten that last 20%. And the guy was going to be, eager to get out of the negotiation and turn his attention to his spouse. Or he could do what he did, which was he went back to the table. He said, "Listen, I've heard about your spouse. Your job is to take care of her. Let's just settle the deal right now on the terms we had yesterday, and we'll call it done." And so that was the right thing to do.
Yes.
And because John Huntsman was an entrepreneur, he owned his own very large company, and he had the financial security to be able to walk away with a deal, but not the best deal he could have gotten.
Yeah.
Because he had that backstop, as you put it. But he also had the instinct, the character to know what the right thing to do was. And I think that's sort of the story of John Huntsman. It's the kind of guy he was.
Well, these are powerful stories. So a few just quick questions here. So we're looking for just quick answers as we kind of wrap this up. First thing is, other than the book that you've written, what has been the single most impactful book that you've read in this area that has shaped your knowledge or shaped what you share with your students?
Oh, that's easy. Robert Cialdini's Influence. The psychology of persuasion. That book was like an atomic bomb went off in my head. I went, that's what I want to write. I want to write a book like that because that book is so practical. It's so well researched. It's so well written, and it stands the test of time.
Yeah, for sure. Outstanding book. Okay, next question. What is one word that you would use to describe kind of the best negotiators that you've encountered? If you had to use one word to describe them, what would that be?
Prepared.
Prepared. Yeah. Outstanding.
I teach executives, at Wharton all the time, and I always know exactly who the best ones are going to be when I watch them negotiate, because they always have a yellow pad. When they're preparing, they're writing down their assumptions and turning them into questions, and then going in with a whole game plan of how they're going to operate.
Got it. Okay, next question. What is one myth about negotiation that you would love to bust forever?
That you have to be clever.
Okay.
That it's a manipulation game. Because I think it's a relationship game. It's not something where you outwit the other side. It's something where you win them over.
Got it. Great stuff. Great stuff. All right. So last question. Give us kind of a final tip for people that are looking to master this process. What's the next thing that they should do to get better as a negotiator?
Well, I think books help because if you haven't thought about it a lot, it gives you the map. But the map is not the territory. The map is the map. And I think once you get some conceptual pictures in your head about what this is, because there are, as you know, patterns that are very predictable, robust, repeatable.
For sure.
Once you get the map, then practice. So that means not in the big deals. It means like practice at the airport, practice, when you're shopping, practice with little events that happen that allow you to understand better how to set a goal, understand better what reciprocity is, understand better how to work with leverage, how to understand better these basic nodal points. But practice, become a negotiator with a capital N, and there's no limit to the upside.
Absolutely. Well, Richard, this has been a rich and robust conversation. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being a part of Negotiation Made Simple, and hopefully we can do it again sometime soon.
All right, John. Really, really appreciate you having me on, and it was a lot of fun.
The takeaway for me from this episode was what Richard talked about with respect to relational capital and how having a really good relationship can often help you capture more value in a deal. I love that story he told about Warren Buffett and the Enterprise Rent-A-Car CEO and how that relationship blossomed into something that created tremendous value for both of them. I think it's important to recognize that as we think about ourselves as negotiators, we are always going to have to negotiate with people. And so paying attention, being intentional about the relationships with the people that we work with, whether they're people on our side of the table or people on the opposite side of the table, those relationships will be critical to our success. Thank you for listening to Negotiation Made Simple, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. All right.